I'm going to share with you the power of the sketch today. We're going to take one sketch and create 5 different cards. So this card is the one we're going to case today. I'm joining Michele Lupton in Case Me a Christmas Card this year, and I am sketching the basic design of her card, and then we're going to mix it up, and I'm going to share with you how you can use this one sketch and get different looks and make 5 easy and really pretty cards. So what I'm doing here is looking at the basic design of the card and recreating it in a sketch style. So it has 3/4 of the card kind of as a base, she's used white space here, a huge sentiment with a bright background in the top, and then a sub sentiment. So I'm going to be putting a lot of these things into play as I'm creating the cards. So the first card that I'm creating here is the one that is most similar to Michele's card. So I've got a large sentiment. This is actually a window sentiment. If you don't have any window sentiments like this, you could easily use a regular sentiment that you do have, or you could use individual letters or word letters and either partial die cut them, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, or you can simply just die cut them out and then adhere them down next to and butt them up against that 3/4 panel that's going to be on the front of the card. So I'm going to take it a little step further, and we're going to do this with a lot of the cards today, and I actually want to pop this whole panel up. So I did add a second layer of cardstock behind it so that it's going to be a bit more stable when I send it through the post. I have a large sentiment here, and then I've added a sub sentiment, so it's very similar to Michele's card. Now I've got this really pretty pastel backgrounds cardstock here from Crafty Critter, and so this is a really fast way to create backgrounds rather than make your own. So these clean and simple cards today can be adapted for any occasion. Today's cards are going to be focused on holidays or Christmas, but you could simply add the word happy instead of merry and make it into a birthday card, or even congrats, whatever you like. And I am using some older products here today because I love them and I love making Christmas cards, and I just can't bring myself to part with them, but I will link similar products where I can. So why not grab one of your favorite card designs and create a sketch of it? It's a great place to start, and then you can just adapt and build on it from there like I'm doing today. Or if you want and you're inspired, you can use the sketch that I'm using off Michele's card. And I've got an added bonus with this second card that we're going to be making, because I'm going to show you how to fix a mistake. But first I'm going to show you what my original plan was. Instead of having a large sentiment at the top of this panel, I thought it'd be fun to partial die cut some snowflakes. I wanted to repeat the same image 3 times, so I just put some tick marks on some white cardstock here so that when I come back with the die cut a second time, I'll know where I need to line it up. So just use the regular cutting sandwich that you would for a thin wafer die. And what I like to do is just to make sure that my paper is nice and straight on my base plate, and that my top cutting plate, it's the one that's going to be cut into, lines up exactly where I want it to be cut to. That way I can roll the whole thing through the machine, and it's only going to cut where that plate was meeting. But don't worry, I am going to walk you through this in a bit more detail in another card later in the video. So I used snowflakes here today, but you could change it up and use maybe some trees or even some houses. They would look fun as well. But there are actually edge dies that you can buy that will make this much easier, this whole process much easier to do. And I actually used the same snowflake 3 times here, just did like a repeat image, but you could use different snowflake shapes too. So one side die cut or partial die cut the 3 snowflakes, then I just use my paper trimmer to cut a straight edge between them, making sure not to cut the actual snowflake away from the base of the 3/4 panel. But don't worry, I'm going to show you an easier way to do this very soon. Or if you don't have a paper trimmer with a guide wire, or you've got like one of those trimmers where you pull the handle down, guillotine, that's the word, then you could easily get a similar result using a metal ruler and a craft blade. I make sure to use a nice strong one, and I am very gentle. This is where it all went pear-shaped. Anyway, that's okay. I'm going to keep on with the card and I'm going to show you how I fix it. I had cut my cardstock bigger than I needed, so I think that the spacing would have been good on a landscape card here. I could come back in and adhere the snowflake again, that would have worked, but what I did instead was change up my design a little bit, and this is going to make this whole card much easier to make, and maybe I should have just started with this. So I kept my middle snowflake and I've added some of the design paper directly to my card base. So this is a similar look to the first card that I did. It's got the color behind the images, and I just attached this directly to the card front because I didn't want to have to sort of try and pop up those really fine lines of snowflake. I cut away the edges of the 3/4 panel, but then I die cut 2 extra snowflakes, and I could have just gone with this from the beginning. It would have been much easier just to die cut the 3 snowflakes, adhere them to this design paper like I'm doing, and then cut away the edge pieces that are hanging over the edge of the panels. Why didn't I think of this before? And similarly to this design, I decided to add a sentiment just beneath those images. So I've used the images instead of the large sentiment here, and I have covered up where the other snowflakes join by popping up that sentiment there. So let me know if you think I saved this card or not. So now I'm going to take a breath. We are going to change it up again. This one's very easy, I promise. What I've done this time is reverse where the color is, and I've gone with some of the design paper, and I'm covering the 3/4 panel with the design paper instead. And I have a little winter village scene that I've used here. There are a lot of dies that do this style of image, but you could just cut a wave with a pair of scissors into some cardstock and cut a couple of little trees or houses and stick those along the edge. That would work well too. I've added a 2-layer sentiment again, but this time it's on the same stamp. Now I did add a second layer of cardstock behind this just to give it that tiny bit of dimension, because I'm going to adhere this to the card front, and that's going to be it. It's a very clean and simple card. So this is kind of similar to the second design in the fact that I've used images instead of a sentiment along the top, but I've still added a sentiment beneath those images. I've kept the sentiment in 2 layers, but this time the design paper is on the larger portion. So that was a nice easy one. This time we're using the same sketch and we're going to go landscape. So this time I want my larger portion of the panel, the 3/4 portion, is going to be on the left side of my landscape. I am going to make that in the design paper again and just add a couple of different layers of cardstock beneath it. So I've chosen some coordinating colors, used some landscape dyes to give them a bit of shape. I wanted this one to be more modern looking, and looking back now, I think some glittery cardstock would have looked really pretty here as well. I layered up the 2 base layers. If you don't have any wavy dies like this, these landscape dies, just simply draw a line on the cardstock, a wavy line, and you could cut it with a pair of scissors. Or you could keep the edges straight and just angle them if you feel more confident with that. I did a little bit of a tear on the top cardstock for a little bit of interest, and then I popped up the sentiment. So it is similar to the sketch, but I have changed it up by going landscape instead of portrait, but the sentiment is die cut and layered and then popped up. So my focus here kind of looks like the sentiment actually. Right, so I've got the sketch again. This time I'm going to flip it. Let's see what we can do. We're actually going to attempt some partial die cutting again, so wish me luck. So I'm die cutting a large word joy, and I'm going to hold it in place with some low tack tape. I've got the cardstock cut the same width as my card panel, so I know that my placement's going to be central. I'm making some tick marks on the cardstock, and this is where I want the die cutting to finish. Because I die cut with the blades facing up, I'm going to reverse those tick marks on the opposite side of the cardstock so that I know where I want to cut to. But if you die cut with the blades cutting down, it's easier to see. I've lined up my top cutting plate with those tick marks that I made, and then I can just roll the whole thing through my machine. It's only going to cut to where that die cutting plate was. Now I know that these letters are only very thin at the bottom, so I was very careful about where I wanted to cut to, but if you've got a thicker letter, it is going to be easier. I'm using my guide wire on my trimmer again to cut away the extra portions of the cardstock, and I can also come in with my blade and get a finer cut here as well, and just remove very gently those pieces of cardstock that I don't want anymore. You may have also noticed that when I use my low tack tape, I put it on the portion of the die cut that where the paper was going to be removed after, just in case it did tear. I layered up the reverse side of this sentiment with a couple more die cuts just to give it some dimension, and I used some scrap pieces of cardstock here to build the base of this to the same height. You may have noticed I also stamped my sub-sentiment before I did this. You're always going to get a better impression when you do that. I also die cut 1.5 of the letters in some black cardstock, and then I covered the whole cardstock with some design paper. So here I've got the same sketch again, but it's been flipped upside down. I have kept my 3/4 panel as the design paper, and then the smaller piece is the white cardstock with the partially die cut word. Or if you want to do it the easy way, just die cut a word separate and sit it on top of that border. Much easier. So altogether now, these are the 5 cards that we've made based on that one sketch where we've changed each card up. This first card was the most similar to the original sketch, but I did pop up the front panel. This card here, I made the 3/4 panel in the design paper and changed up the top of the sketch to a scene. This partial / not partial die cutting example where I used the 3 snowflakes and kept the sentiment beneath that with the similar design paper beneath. Then we flipped the sketch to a landscape design and kept the 3/4 panel in design paper again this time, and popped up the sentiment and made that more of the focus. And my final card where we did some successful partial die cutting, where I flipped the sketch completely and had the main sentiment at the base of the card. I hope these ideas have inspired you to have a look at your card designs a little bit closer and maybe create a sketch, or even use the sketch that I've made from Michele's card on some of your own cards. And I also have a link in the description below where you can go and see how Michele was inspired by one of my cards. If you liked today's video, please click on the thumbs up button. And if you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? It's totally free. And I also have some more Christmassy videos here for you to enjoy. I look forward to seeing you there. Till next time, happy Christmas paper crafting. Bye.